to also brief the people that just joined us now, could you so kindly switch off your cameras? So we had a few requests from SMEs who had said that it would be great if the cameras were switched off, mainly because of the data costs. So if we could just be so kind as to be mindful of that, because also, again, there will be 3 videos that will be played as part of the presentations of some of our speakers here. Somebody in the chat box had asked how they could get involved. I believe the contact details for Zach are right on the screen. So you can take those and then get in touch with him and see how you guys could collaborate together. So right now we are going to jump into the panel discussion with 4 absolutely incredible young people who are entrepreneurs in their own right. They are solving various issues within their communities, from connectivity to creating jobs for young boys in their communities to skills. And one also is in the road safety space. So before we jump into that, I would like to just encourage all of us to use the chat box, which should be on the right hand side. If you want to ask questions, there will be a Q&A section right at the end. But if you'd like to ask questions, so that you don't forget, I will go back to those questions. So just type it up there. Or if you just want to make a comment, feel free to do so, or make a suggestion, or in addition to what has already been shared, if you want to share some insights, please use the chat box. And before I mess it up, I'm just going to introduce Luvo Grey, who is an entrepreneur and founder of EC Internet. He will do justice to his own introduction, so I will not say anything further. Luvo, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mapumulo, and thank you to Ms. Francois, the country director of the World Bank in South Africa. Pearl, are you going to be sharing my screen, or should I share on my side? Okay, thank you. Internet connectivity is no longer a luxury. It has become, and should in fact be, a human right. Slide 2. Okay, my name is Luvo Grey, the managing director of EC Internet, a licensed Tier 3 wireless internet service provider that holds both the electronic communication service license and the electronic communication network service license. We are currently operating in the unlicensed spectrum in the 2.4 gigahertz band and the 5.8 gigahertz band. EC Internet is a 100% youth-owned company run by 3 directors with more than 35 years experience in the telecommunications industry, both in terms of business development and technical experience. We are currently servicing the Siaka and Danzani Township in Buffalo City in the Eastern Cape. Just this past week, we have been fixing and finalizing our wireless network in Mdantsane, hoping to cover at least 2 further units with a coverage of about 240 unconnected households and about 30 micro and small enterprises. At the moment, we are basically mostly leveraging on third-party infrastructure. Our 5-year plan is to connect 100,000 township, rural households and SMMEs, and also deploy Wi-Fi hotspots in townships and rural areas across the Eastern Cape. In doing so, we will be playing our part in bridging the digital divide. I believe in as much as it is important for us to engage in this national discourse of the 4th industrial revolution as a country in South Africa, it won't have any meaningful impact if the masses in the townships and the rural areas aren't connected to the internet. In order for South Africa to take full advantage of the opportunities presented by the 4IR, township and rural folks need to be connected to reliable and affordable internet connectivity. Next slide. The latest Stats SA figures on internet penetration state that about 59.3% of South Africans can now basically have access to internet in one way or the other. 53% of these people are making use of mobile connections. Access at home, meanwhile, remains relatively low, with only about 9.5% of the population having a connection in their household. Gauteng leading the way with about 72.2% of its people having online access, while the Western Cape is close behind with about 68.5%. Limpopo and the Eastern Cape continue to struggle with telecommunications infrastructure with a mere 42.4% and 43% respectively, with a less than 2% having an internet connection at home. Only 2% of rural homes are connected to the internet. Only 2%, ladies and gentlemen. Even though there are about 450 registered tier 3 internet service providers in South Africa, less than 10% of those are catering for the rural and township communities. According to the World Bank, in their digital dividends, the World Development Report of 2016, it is stated that each 10% in the internet penetration rate in developed and developing countries will cause a rise in about 1.38% and 1.21% in gross domestic product. So basically, providing reliable and affordable connectivity is not only a business endeavor, it is also an act of patriotism. World Bank says that an increase in broadband infrastructure increases productivity, but why do we still have low internet penetration rate in South Africa, in particular townships and rural areas? Next slide. Mobile network operators, wireless service providers, and fiber access providers aren't building infrastructure in rural and township communities because it doesn't make business sense to them, due to an overwhelming majority of township and rural people being in the lower living standard measures. South Africa has about 14.5 million households in total. If you look carefully at the image projected on your screens, you'll see that what is popularly known as a squatter camp. However, that is not the focal point for today's discussion. In this image, there's about 40 households with at least 30 of them subscribed to DSTV. This is in Duncan Village, by the way, one of the most notorious and poorest townships in the country. DSTV has about 7 million subscribers in South Africa, which means that more than 40% of South African households are on DSTV. 7 million households paying an average of about 399 Rand a month for mostly entertainment purposes. For 399 Rand, we can offer a client an uncapped 5 megabits per second line that gives you access to the world of the internet with more options that you could possibly get on DSTV. One would be able to access Netflix and unlimited content on YouTube. This also presents an opportunity for young people in townships to gain access to plenty of educational content, which is mostly free on the internet. Next slide, please. So access to infrastructure to the people in the townships and rural areas is more than a want, it is becoming a need. They're not solely demanding free connectivity, they are rather seeking for reliable and affordable internet connectivity with coverage at their households and their businesses. Township and rural-based communities need internet connectivity, and COVID-19 has further stamped the need to invest in telecommunications infrastructure with the majority of the workforce working from home. I recently saw a remote job advertised by Amazon, and a prerequisite was a 10 megabits per second line. How do young people who reside in townships compete in such a market? This is the new normal, right? And we are entering the gig economy, and internet connectivity is going to be a necessity in our lives in as much as electricity is. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest challenges that we are currently facing as running an internet service provider in townships like Mtansane and Siaka is a huge growing demand for connectivity in townships, and us not being able to meet the demand due to lack of infrastructure in particular and finances. And this headache has been further intensified by the exponential demands due to plenty of individuals working from home during this lockdown period. As we all know, the internet service provider business model works on economies of scale, and therefore it takes a bit of time to build financial capital. We've been forced to diversify our services offering by also distributing technology solutions specifically for this particular period. Due to our infrastructure constraints, we've had to utilize this strategy in order for us to build more cash flow. We are barely breaking even at the moment due to lack of finance and infrastructure. In order for us to be able to cater for the growing demand, we need to invest in infrastructure covering the targeted areas because 90% of them are not connected. And over 60% of them can afford at least a 5 megabits per second line, which is for about 399 Rand. So we are calling on organizations such as the World Bank, government institutions, and corporate representatives listening to this webinar to assist us by investing in this much needed infrastructure, the capital doesn't have to be cheap, but it has to be patient. The National Development Plan talks about the need to invest in ICT infrastructure by 2030, which is 10 years from now. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 9 basically talks about aims to significantly increase access to information and communication technologies and strives to provide internet access in at least the developed countries. And that is by 2030. You can basically give me an answer as to the progress of that, in particular South Africa, specifically when I've already given you the statistics about the internet penetration in townships and rural areas. Next slide. So basically, we have a vision of connecting 100,000 households, SMMEs, and individuals in townships and rural communities by 2025. And we are sending out a clarion call to all the organizations represented here today and whomever is listening and has the muscle to join us as we provide this basic human right, which is access to the internet. I would like to end off my presentation by quoting the late father of the nation, Tatu Nelson Mandela, by saying, "It always seems impossible until it's done." Thank you very much.
Wow, what a fantastic presentation, Luvo. Absolutely fantastic. So we're just going to jump on to the next presentation, and we're going to leave